Boston College football starts their spring practices, and the Eagles land their first quarterback commitment of the class of 2023. We're going to be joined by Mitch Wolfe and talk all about this and more on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. Thank you all for listening. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the best place to make all of your sports wagers. Head on over to BetOnline.net today. It's where the game starts. All right. On Saturday, Boston College football started up their spring practice, and I know a lot of people are excited. Well, not a lot of people, because there's not really a lot to talk about when it comes to spring football, but some of us do. And I know one who is Mitch Wolfe, who's one of our writers from BC Bulletin, does a whole bunch of other things. Mitch, how's it going?
I'm doing good. I think, like you said, not that many people care about spring football, but with, the MLB lockout currently seemingly extended into the foreseeable future, hope will spring eternal somewhere else.
So Jeff Hafley, they talked to the media on Saturday, and a lot of it was the boilerplate. I'm excited. They worked real hard. And it's like, yeah, great. I still am floored by journalists that find that stuff intriguing to write about. For me, it's same stuff every year.
It's like when like a new coach gets hired anywhere and they say he won the press conference because he wore a tie that is the school colors and said whatever the school phrase is once or twice, so there's not a lot to be made of it.
When I listened to the press conference, and I think it was Rich Thompson from the Herald said, everyone wants to know. I'm like, ask him about the coaches. How are the players feeling? I'm like, oh my God, Rich. I think everyone wants to know about all the coaches, but he didn't ask that. So what were your thoughts about Hafley's comments? Did you get a chance to check them out? And what are you thinking about spring football so far this year?
I think for me, for spring football is, this is, now we're looking at a team that is really Jeff Hafley's team. Most of the guys they've kind of rotated out were Adazio guys, pretty much everybody who's left, or the vast majority of people who are left, are Hafley guys. And it's kind of up to them, especially like along the offensive line. Like, it's up to them to really step up and make names for themselves on this team. And, this team has been it goes as far as the offensive line goes for a very long time. And now the unit is almost completely turned over. So that'll be very interesting to see how that unit affects the offense, which returns a lot of really good playmakers. And then on the defensive side, the unit had, some very good performances, some pretty bad ones, and there were a good amount of important injuries. So it'll be interesting to see this year, can they stay healthy? And, again, with that unit, there's a little more of the younger guys playing. So you hopefully want to see them take the next step forward and look to be consistent contributors moving forward.
One of the big things, though, that I thought Hafley brought up that I think it's interesting to just kind of reflect on is this is the first spring football that he's had that's been normal. He said that, 2020, his first year, obviously, if you remember, was cut short because the pandemic hit. Then last year was still up and down with the cases and everything like that. And he was doing all his press conferences via Zoom. So this is his first spring football where he gets to do things normally. I think that's important to reflect upon as well. Now, one of the things that came out of practice was there was some roster changes and some roster notes. And I know Mitch is going to have an article up on BC Bulletin on Monday morning that kind of highlights some of the things that he noticed, but let's let Mitch talk a little bit about it. So Mitch, what did you notice in terms of the roster?
Yeah. So, with the spring roster, you usually expect to see a number of position changes, but there were only two this year. And one was Jackson Ness moving from defensive line to offensive line. And Ness barely played in the last few years for BC. I think he had 15 snaps total. So they're kind of transitioning to a new style of defense, and he maybe didn't fit that as well. So they're like, all right, we're going to try out in the offensive line. And I'm thinking maybe they'll kind of use him as a hybrid lineman, tight end, and extra lineman sets down by the goal line. Maybe the other one was Tony Muse, who's a walk-on who moved from running back to wide receiver. So yeah, nothing really of note there, which was kind of disappointing because it's always interesting to think about. In terms of size changes, that's another big one. most people's weights kind of just fluctuate a little bit up and down. The one big one was Christian Mahogany coming in at 335 when he was at 318 last year. And that number's surprising, but then honestly, if you think about it, if you think about how he looked relative to Zion Johnson, who was listed at only 2 pounds lighter than him, Mahogany looked significantly thicker than Johnson did. They're both big guys, obviously, but I think that, if you had Mahogany's weight from last year, if you checked it again, it would probably be a little closer to 335 number, but I imagine they might, get that weight down maybe in the 325 to 330 range by the time we get to, the end of summer practice and fall camp.
Yeah, and there was a couple names that we were talking about as well that were off the roster. Now, we talked all offseason, Mitch just mentioned it. Like, there was a bunch of players that kind of, I don't want to say were pushed off, but kind of, I think the staff said, you're not going to have a role here. Why don't you enter the portal? We'll help you find a new spot. And most of them have. You saw guys like, Joe Sparacio ending up at Eastern Michigan, Hugh Davis, Louisiana Tech. You had the two guys, Kobe White and Deion Jones at James Madison, and Jamin Muse at Buffalo. But there was a few names that kind of trickled under the radar. And I thought I was expecting them because they have not played any role with BC in a while. And, if they've already graduated, might as well move on. And that was Nick DiNucci, who is a linebacker, and Javian Dane, son of Ron Dane, who the announcers can no longer bring up every single game. And there was a third one, and I'm totally blanking on who it was.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it now, but I'm not sure of it either. I feel like it was an offensive lineman, Eric Larson.
Okay, Eric Larson.
But he didn't play very much either, so it's not.
Yes. So guys more fringy, but if BC is going to still go after the transfer portal, and I think there still are, because there's going to be new names that pop up as spring football goes on, and guys realize that maybe they're not a fit in, a new coaching system or on the roster like they thought they would be. These fringy guys that wouldn't play a role are kind of hogging up one of your spots, so they're gone.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The DiNucci one kind of surprised me because he obviously hadn't played a ton, but he was somebody who had experience, had the size, and just really never broke the lineup. And I'm guessing maybe he just didn't have the athletic ability that the new staff wanted out of their linebackers, given the kind of guys they're playing there and who they're recruiting. So he might have just been like, all right, I think he was a redshirt junior, so he's been around a while. So he might have just graduated and been like, all right, my football career is over
here, at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had somewhere else. So
Tyler Days was the other one, but he's kind of in the portal now. So, but that's another one.
Who are some players you're watching for during spring camp?
I just mentioned, but I think the linebacker room is going to be really interesting because, Vinny DePalma and Cam Arnold are back as the kind of presumed starters. I think Bryce Steele will get a lot of playing time, and that unit kind of had a bit of a rough year last year, mostly because of injuries. And, Cam Arnold was kind of adjusting to the position, but now he's been there a whole year. Bryce Steele has played a good bit for a whole year. So I think that room is very interesting to watch, especially with how, we want BC to get better at stopping the run and stopping mobile quarterbacks. Obviously the defensive line, actually both lines are really interesting because, we've talked a lot about how the defensive line didn't really get a lot of pressure on the quarterback during key moments in games. And then the offensive line, like I mentioned earlier, turning over a bunch of new positions, you want to see how those new guys who is going to be playing, actually, like not even, because we're not sure who the starters are going to be just yet.
Yeah, I think that positional battle will be absolutely entertaining. Now, in a moment, Mitch and I are going to talk about recruiting as Boston College football landed their 2023 quarterback. Usually they get one a class, and we'll talk about who that is and what we think of BC's newest commitment. Before we do that, BetOnline is the place to head when football is over and basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fire coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. Before we get into our next segment, I just talk a little bit shop here. So our site, our podcast has been on YouTube for about 3 months now. and we're almost at 200 subscribers. Thank you all who have already subscribed to YouTube, and for all of you who have started to listen on YouTube, thank you as well, because it's made a huge difference. And we're going to continue to put new content up there. I'm going to start to do some special alerts when things happen up on YouTube as well. So you'll get that. It won't be pushed to the podcast feed. So you'll have to be subscribed to YouTube for that. Now, in addition to that, some site news or some podcast news for you as well. I'm going to be doing some themed stuff going on during the off season as basketball is kind of trickling down. We're heading into spring football. And it gets a little bit quieter in terms of games. I'm sure many of you don't really care about talking BC baseball all that much. We'll talk about that in the third segment. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have recruiting Wednesdays with me. So Wednesdays, I know you guys, many of you have subscribed to BC Bulletin Premium to get a lot of my BC news. I talked to a lot of recruits, and we're going to talk about one I just talked to, and he's committed to BC. I'm going to give you a lot of lowdowns on the podcast. It's not going to be a whole episode on recruiting because there's always news and things I'm going to need to get to too. But I'm thinking one or two segments on Wednesdays that are dedicated to buzz about recruiting, players you want to know about, anything like that. So Wednesdays, mark that on your calendar. I will be talking about that. Mitch he's going to be sticking with his Mondays with us, right, Mitch?
Yes, sir.
So we'll have Mondays with Mitch, and that's going to be the title of those episodes. We'll have Mondays with Mitch, who will be talking football. I know Mitch is really into the draft, so we've got a ton of stuff with Mitch coming up, talking about all the BC guys. And I like just talking draft stuff in general, so we'll talk a little bit about some of the other guys out there as well.
Yeah, we got combine this week. This is a big week.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big. And we'll get into all that. And then on Fridays, I'm going to do mailbags. So 3 shows a week already are all planned out. So you're going to have some themes that are going on during the off season. So check it out. Wednesdays, recruiting, Mondays with Mitch, Fridays, mailbag. You're going to get everything on all of that on wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. So check that out. So I was just mentioning recruiting. Boston College football landed their 4th commitment of the class of 2023. And it was a big one because it's their quarterback. And usually college football teams only take one quarterback a class. And given the amount of quarterbacks in the room right now for BC, I doubt they'll take a second one. And that name was Jacobe Robinson. And he is a junior, not rated recruit out of Henderson, Texas. He was recruited by John McNulty. So this is BC's offensive coordinator's first commitment. And usually the offensive coordinator, especially if they're the quarterback's coach, only focus on the quarterback when they're with their recruiting. So you won't hear McNulty as a primary recruiter from basically anyone else. I'm sure he'll connect with like the wide receivers and offensive linemen and things like that. But Robinson was like his big guy. Now, if you want to hear about Robinson, check out my interview specifically with him on BC Bulletin. I talked to him, and Mitch is into scouting and talking about how players are developing. And he got to see a little bit about Robinson's film. So Mitch, what were some of the things that you noticed about his play?
I think Robinson is going to be a unique quarterback that, I think he kind of reminds me of what we wanted Anthony Brown to be in terms of like there's just the way his mechanics and body work, the way he throws the ball. He kind of has a bit of a sidearm motion right now. When I was watching, I was kind of just trying to see what his mechanics were like. And I think his feet are good for the most part. It's just about marrying how his feet and basically building up your throw power from your feet up through your legs, through your hips, and then up through your shoulders, through the arm. Because, there's like for a guy in this draft class, like Malik Willis, who has, an incredible arm by itself, but the mechanics with his whole body aren't there. So you lose a lot of throw power in terms of distance and velocity. And so, Robinson's high schooler. So that's, it's not going to be perfect right now. But like you said, like he has no stars. So I'm sure people are going to kind of freak out about that. His only offers are from FCS programs, but it does include Jackson State, who's, making some runs at, kind of being one of the upper echelon programs in the FCS. And I imagine that after this commitment, he might become like a 2 or 3 star, because that's kind of how it works with like a lot of these services. Once they get offers and commitments, they kind of get bumped up. But Robinson can run very well. I really like his running style. And he's pretty accurate. He's got a very good arm. I was watching his highlights, and there was like a ball that went about 55 yards down the field, which is fantastic for high school quarterbacks. So I'm excited for this. Like, I think, it'll be kind of a competition in a few years, essentially between maybe him and Peter Delaportis. But I mean, that's a good pair of dudes to have.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting to me was earlier this weekend or late last week, there was a local recruit. His name was William Watson. A lot of local high school Massachusetts writers were really high on him because he was Joseph Griffin the second or third quarterback. He had a lot of big offers. And I had been told he had not been anyone BC. Like I had retweeted and was immediately pinged by BC to be like, yeah, we're not in on him. And I was like, okay. And I look at the specs of the two quarterbacks and it made a lot of sense to me. Watson is 6'0", 185. This kid, Robinson, is 6'3", 220. And kind of fits into the mold BC's going for. They're going for these bigger, like, just like we see with Phil Dracovic, right? Bigger quarterbacks. I mean, Emmett Morehead's enormous. And I think they like those types of bigger quarterbacks. What do you get from a bigger quarterback that you wouldn't get from a smaller one?
So I'll say kind of the drawbacks of the smaller one to put it in that perspective. So, and this is something that you saw about concerns with guys like Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray in the NFL is that, you're not, just because you're short doesn't mean you can't play quarterback, but what it means is that when you're trying, it makes it very difficult to throw over the middle in the intermediate area of the field, which is obviously where a lot of passing concepts develop. So because they have trouble seeing over the offensive lineman, it makes it difficult for them to, see your crossing routes kind of between the numbers or between the hashes. And that's kind of the reason why people are not as big a fan of short quarterbacks. With taller quarterbacks, obviously that you kind of open up the whole playbook. Generally, if you're taller, you have longer limbs. That makes it a little easier. There is kind of a point where you can become too tall, where you're kind of gangly. And there's actually some people who said like you're too tall so the defenders can read the quarterback's eyes so much better because his eyes are so high up and they're easy to find. That was the problem with Brock Osweiler, apparently. And then with shorter quarterbacks, and what I've kind of read on Watson is that he's a more of just a scrambling quarterback. Like, I'm looking at his offer sheet, and there's some SEC, some Big Ten schools. Kind of, he has a whole smattering, and he's committed to Nebraska. And with Nebraska, with Scott Frost's like kind of super spread hyper speed offense, you want running quarterbacks that are generally smaller, who are better athletes in the open field.
Okay, so yeah, and I think, as you said, Robinson, he's a developmental guy. And, if BC fans are hoping for guys that are 4 stars, I know people were joking about Arch Manning. And I was like, yeah, okay, a good joke, but he's getting his bag somewhere. And I
mean, there was a point where, BC fans were saying that Joe Brady was going to be Arch Manning's offensive coordinator. So, let's let people dream, even though if it's completely unrealistic.
Right. So, Robinson fits right into that developmental phase, right? Like a guy that has the tools. And if you have the quarterback coach that can put them together, he could be something, right?
Oh yeah, no question. Like, I mean, I have full confidence that, I think that once this commitment is in, like, it wouldn't shock me to see him get some offers from some more FBS programs. It'll be interesting to see if he does flip, but, hopefully he doesn't, because I think he is a good piece to have. They kind of have, it seems kind of have a post Phil Dracovic plan, or at least, an idea of what they want to do at the quarterback position, but it's always nice to kind of keep thinking for the future. And like you said, bring in one quarterback per class just to kind of be safe in case you do get hit by injuries or there's a lot of transfers or something. Just always good to have, an extra body of a guy who is, a FBS caliber quarterback. And
Boston College would never know what it feels like to not have any quarterbacks in the quarterback room. Not like they just literally just went through that, but yeah. So Mitch, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE. I'm usually tweeting out my scouting reports. You can also find my draft podcast, which is Fired Up NFL Draft, where me and a friend of mine, Daniel Garrett, we just talk about draft prospects. And we try not to do the basic, like, oh, we're gonna do like a mock draft every week, because a lot of people already do that. So we really try to keep it locked in on talking about draft prospects. So that's a great resource if you're interested in the draft and want to learn more about the prospects. And if you want to see some of my scouting reports on non-BC players, you can find that at aroundtheblock.com. And, in the coming weeks, once we get after the combine, I'll start, posting my draft scouting reports of the BC players on BC Bulletin.
All right. Thank you so much, Mitch. In a moment, I'm going to be talking about the basketball game from this weekend. Women's basketball takes care of business, and men's hockey has a pretty solid weekend. We'll get into all of that and baseball's failure all in a moment. This is the time of the year where I've given up on almost all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my New Year resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually do enjoy eating them. And have you tried their Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. Can you believe that? A protein-infused marshmallow. They are delicious. They're 100% covered in chocolate. And they got some awesome flavors you gotta check out, including the cinnamon churro, the coconut marshmallow, and the banana cream pie. They're so good, and they're gonna be your new favorite. So they're low calorie, high protein, and you can replace your candy bars with these because they are better for you. They only have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. How are you going to beat that? You just can't. So head on over to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your order. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black. What's going to go over some of the big events from the weekend. Now, BC basketball had their game on Saturday. It was senior day at Alumni Stadium for 3 seniors, Mekhi Ashton Langford, Brevin Galloway, and James Karnick, excuse me. And BC basketball had their rematch against Clemson. And this game, unfortunately, did not end the way that the last Clemson game ended, where BC won on a 3-pointer by Galloway. BC lost 70-60 in this one. This is a tough loss for BC. Clemson was out there without their leading scorer, PJ Hall, and still proceeded to win this game. BC just could not shoot. It was, Taylor Zola's time. They shot 36% from the field, but their 3-point shooting was awful. They shot 20.7%. It was one of those games again. They shot 29 3-pointers. Now, given that Boston College basketball has one of the most inconsistent 3-point shooting teams in the country, they should not be taking those shots. And a lot of those shots that they were taking were contested. They were giving up more open shots to take these bad shots. It was just a strange game in terms of their offensive flow. They just never got into the swing of things. They were tied with Clemson a good chunk of the way into the second half, and then Clemson ripped off a huge run led by Chase Hunter, who led the team with 23 points, and that was it. BC is now 11-17. This was tough because BC could have had their 3rd straight ACC win. As I tweeted earlier, it would have been the first time they've done that since 2015, which tells you about the state of the program, but they couldn't do it. And that's it. And now their next game is going to be a tough one. It's against Miami at Conti Forum. It's a 9 p.m. start. Late game again, but we'll be here to cover it. So that was one of the games of the weekend. But let's go to the positives. Let's get away from the negativity from the weekend. A tough loss for BC basketball. But what team needed a win and did so very convincingly? That was BC women's basketball. Thrashed Syracuse 91-75. Cam Schwartz scored her 1,000th point of the game when she had a 3-pointer in that game. BC was all over Syracuse. They were up 58-24 at halftime. They let Syracuse kind of sneak back into this one. Syracuse was only down by 10 points at one point. So it was a little bit disheartening to see BC kind of take their foot off the gas, but a huge win for the Eagles, who needed, this is a team that's like right on the edge of making the tournament, which would be their first tournament since 2006. That's 16 years ago. They're 19-10 right now. Now, they need a win. They need a win in the ACC tournament bad. And unfortunately for the women, they get Florida State, who already beat BC 66-58 the last time they played a couple weeks ago. So this is a rematch, and BC's been playing excellent since then. They have 3 straight wins against Wake Forest, Duke, and Syracuse. Can they beat Florida State and seal their trip to the tournament? We'll find out on Thursday in the ACC tournament. Now, in terms of positivity again, men's hockey had a decent weekend, because I don't think anyone had any expectations going into this weekend when they faced off with number 13 BU in the Battle of the Commonwealth, the Battle of ComAv. And on Saturday, it was as ugly as you'd expect. They lost 6-3. They were down 5-1 at one point. Just an ugly loss. But credit to Boston College, who came back at home and beat BU 3-1. to earn their 12th win of the season. They're now 12-17-5. They're going to finish below 500 for the season. Tough season. Eric Dopp had a great game. He had 42 saves. The winner was a goal by Drew Hellison with just under 5 minutes left in the third period. Patrick Giles hit the go-ahead shorthanded goal to give BC the win. Now they get 2 games against UMass. It's going to be a tough way to end the season, but hey, at least they got a win here. They're starting to build something a little bit here. They got a couple wins. They beat Northeastern last weekend. They beat BU this weekend. That's all you can ask for, given how bad they were playing for about a month there. Going in each week and getting a win with what you have is probably the best you're going to ask for. And speaking of wins and not happening, let's talk about baseball. Whew, what rough weekend for BC baseball, who is now 2-4. They had a win. They beat Presbyterian 7-6, so that was nice. Again, the bullpen, I believe, blew a lead in this one. The bullpen blew a lead in the 4th inning. They let up 6 runs, but then BC's bats came alive. And then credit to BC's bullpen, who pitched a scoreless 5th through 9th inning, only allowing 4 hits the entire game. Good game for BC there. However, let's get to the negatives. They then scored 3 runs total against USC Upstate and George Mason. And against George Mason, BC's bats went completely silent as their starter struck out 10 and pitched a complete game 4-hitter against BC. BC's pitching wasn't all that bad. I mean, they let up Brendan Coffey had a rough inning where he let up 3 runs, and that was it. But other than that, I thought, you just ran into a really good pitcher, and that was, a loss right there. You're gonna have games when you're not gonna hit, and that happened there. Then against USC Upstate, I've never even heard of this school before today. No offense to anyone who's like, oh, they're a great team. I don't know anything about them. BC, again, their bats just couldn't get the ball. They couldn't plate anyone. They left, a ton of guys on base. They had 11 hits, only were able to plate 2 runs. They lose 6-2. And then their second game against USC was canceled because of rain. So there was a game on Sunday that was supposed to happen. But that didn't happen. So BC baseball is now 2-4. Tough. They're a tough team to watch right now. The way that they're playing, they're going to play Northern Florida in a 3-game series this weekend, starting on Friday. So hopefully, maybe they can figure some stuff out and turn it around there. Now, this is AJ Black. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. On tomorrow's show, we're going to continue talking about spring football, get you a little bit more information there, and anything else that pops up in the news, because I'm sure there'll be some new stuff, especially with the Combine coming. We'll have all sorts of Combine information that you're going to want to know about. Make sure to follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter as well at AJBlack_BC or LockedOnBC. Thank you, and please tell a friend about our podcast. It really does help. Take care, everyone. We'll see you again soon.